Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Death Note, Part 1, Episode 1, Rebirth. And here we have our episode in a nutshell, which is a brief summary and a line or two about what happens in the episode. Ryuk drops the Death Note into the human world, which Light then picks up. Light begins writing the names of criminals in an effort to eliminate evil and become the god of a new world. And now we're going to go into a more detailed summary, part by part, scene by scene. Our first scene starts with a pan over a desolate wasteland of bones, rocks, and sand, all gray. We then reach Ryuk, who's sitting on a rock overlooking a cliff, and below the cliff is groups of gambling Shinigami. Ryuk is asked to join a game, but he's too busy gazing off into the horizon. It's a very short scene, but it effectively shows the idleness and desolation of the Shinigami realm. In our next scene, we meet our main character, Light, for the first time. Light is attending class. He's looking bored as his classmates around him are all playing games, reading magazines, talking, etc. The teacher then asks him to translate a passage, and he stands up, and he's able to do so with very little effort. Once the day ends, Light walks home, and while he's walking home, various voices give the news of various murders and crimes that have occurred throughout the day while he's been in class. As he's walking, Light muses about how day after day it's the same thing over and over again. While in the Shinigami realm, Ryuk is split-screened, basically thinking the same thing, and then in unison, they both think that this world is rotten. What I love about this scene, and really the series as a whole, is that the background music is very epic. It sets a very good tone for the entire thing, and I feel like it really serves in this scene to highlight the boredom of Light. And then we have the previous scene showing the boredom of Ryuk, and that shows that their lack of entertainment is very much the same. It also, when the news people are basically on there going, oh, look at all this crime all the time, every day, it really shows how he thinks the world's rotten and why we as audience members should really agree. We then go to the next scene, which is Light at yet another day of class. He's gazing out of the window during class, not really paying attention, and then he sees the Death Note fall down from the sky. After class, he casually goes out and picks it up. He reads the title, then he reads out the first rule of how to use it, which is that the human whose name is written in this note shall die. He scoffs and closes the book, putting it back and thinking it's stupid, comparing it to chain letters. But then as he's walking away, he happens to glance back. We then cut to him actually walking home, thinking something's the matter with him, and then we can see that the note can be seen sticking out of his bag, therefore implying that he went back for it. For this, it really shows how much he's longing for something interesting that he went back even while thinking that it was stupid or a hoax. I want to say that there's a potential supernatural pull to it, but in all honesty, in this scene, there are a ton of students all over the yard. If there was some sort of supernatural pull that this book wanted somebody to pick it up and find it, there were a lot of people who would have gotten to it way before Light did. Light may have seen it fall from the sky, but there were a lot of kids in that yard. A lot of kids who, if it was a supernatural pull, would have been pulled to it. So I questioned whether or not there actually is any sort of supernatural pull to it, but it is true that he wasn't able to leave it behind. Our next scene has Light making it home. And while he's at home, he continues to go over more of the rules that are in the cover of the book because he can't leave it alone. Some of the rules that he reads out are that this note will not take effect unless the writer has the person's face in their mind when writing his or her name. Therefore, people sharing the same name will not be affected. If the cause of death is written within 40 seconds of writing the person's name, it will happen. If the cause of death is not specified, the person will simply die of a heart attack. After writing cause of death, details of the death should be written in the next 6 minutes and 40 seconds, which he takes to mean that you can either just let somebody die or you can make them suffer. But he's still at this point considering it a prank. But as time goes on, he continues to muse on it, continues to think about it, until eventually he dramatically opens it. He then dramatically pulls out a pen, and then he dramatically slams it onto the page, but does not write anything at first. Because he has to think about it. Before he writes, he wonders if someone actually dies, if that makes him a murderer. Then, coincidentally, a news segment of an ongoing hostage situation happens to start playing on his TV. Light decides to write the name of the criminal and waits, watching the TV, for 40 seconds. After 40 seconds has passed and nothing has happened on the TV, he decides he's been silly and goes to turn off the TV. But just as he's about to turn it off, a breaking update comes on, and the hostages all come out as SWAT goes into the building. SWAT then reports that the suspect has died. One of the news anchors relays that according to a hostage, he suddenly collapsed. Light becomes very panicked at this, but he's still enough in denial that he thinks it's fine. It's fine. It's not real. It couldn't possibly be real. Total coincidence. And then his mother calls him to go to prep school. He decides that he's going to test it one more time to be sure. And he decides that it has to be another criminal. In this scene, we obviously get the first usage of the Death Note. It does show in this scene that he cannot stop thinking about that book. He thinks that it is fake. He thinks that it's a prank, and yet he still cannot leave it alone, cannot stop thinking about it. And it does kind of feel like it's almost like a compulsion for him at this point. But whether that's a supernatural compulsion or just born out of his own boredom, it's unsure. But it is nice that the first time he uses it, it's to save people. And then the first test, he's deciding to do that on a criminal rather than an innocent person, which, best case scenario, really. If you're planning to use it, you're going to be a murderer either way, but if you're going to murder the bad guys. Our next scene has him at his prep course, and he decides that when he tests the note, he needs an immediate result so that it can't be covered up by the news, it can't be faked, it can't be deceiving him in any way. And then he notices a boy at a desk nearby being bullied. He briefly considers killing the bully, but thinks he should avoid the people around him so that he doesn't get suspected. Though he does make a point of noting that he doesn't think anyone would care if the bully died. He then exits the building, and it shows some dislikable behavior in the students around him. As he leaves, there are girls planning to play around with boys' feelings. There's a boy bad-mouthing his mom for being late, and he thinks of them as sickening, and considers doing society a favor by killing them. As he heads to the convenience store, a motorcycle gang just coincidentally happens to be there and accosts a woman who's walking and minding her own business. It just so happens that conveniently, the leader also introduces himself with his full name and pulls down the shades on his face so that it can be fully seen. Light goes inside, pretends to read a magazine while watching from the window, and sneakily writing the name of the criminal into the note and putting the cause of death as an accident. The woman breaks free and runs away, and the criminal goes to chase her on his bike, but as soon as he gets into the road, his bike is hit by a bus, killing him. In shock, Light watches while the Death Note, being real, is proven right in front of his face. Now with the scene, I like it and I don't like it. Honestly, I like that he's now has this proven, and he does have the initial moral sense to not kill innocent people who have done nothing wrong, or for, I guess, selfish means, you might say. But we already show that Light has very flimsy conviction on this. Bullies, yes, they are very dislikable people. Nobody likes a bully, but they're not criminals. A kid who's being disrespectful to his mother may be dislikable, not a criminal. Girls who want to play around with boys' feelings to get free food or something like that. Again, dislikable behavior, but not criminal. Now, at this point, he hasn't outright expressed that he's only killing criminals. He wants to test it on a criminal, but he hasn't outright said that's going to be his modus operandi, shall we say. So there is some forgivability there, but at the same time, like his conviction, it's so flimsy. It's like, oh, a random kid that's being mean, I'm gonna go kill them. Or, but the only reason he doesn't, someone might connect it to me because we're in the same class. Absolutely ridiculous, and that is very immoral, in my opinion. Just because somebody is not likable does not mean that you should kill them. And they are not criminals. And the whole point of Light's character, I feel, of Kira is that there's that he's a moral criminal in a sense. He's killing the bad guys. So even though he himself is a murderer, he's a good murderer because he's killing the people who kill other people and kill innocent people. But if he was going around killing things like bullies or random students, that would be a completely different story. That would make him far less likable as a character, and he almost does that in this scene, which does bother me. Kind of like, maybe you should be a little bit more strong in your convictions. But, um, that's Light. So now we're going to move on to our next scene. So in the next scene, we're back with Ryuk in the Shinigami realm. Ryuk decides that he'd better get going. After all, it's been 5 days since he dropped the note. One of the other Shinigami asks where he's going, telling him that the Shinigami realm is barren no matter where you go. In other words, there's no need to move around. Ryuk says he's dropped his note, which makes a lot of the Shinigami laugh at him, because that's a faux pas, you don't do that. One of the Shinigamis says he's really messed up. Well, then another one suddenly remembers he was carrying around a second note behind the old man's back, and asks if he dropped both of them. Then when asked if he remembers where he dropped it, he tells them that he dropped it in the human world, and they all seem kind of shocked by that. It then shows Ryuk going down a winding spiral staircase of stone to a white glowing pool slash portal that has little wisps of what appear to be souls flying out of it. He sprouts wings right out the back of his back and then jumps in. On the other side of the portal, we see him appearing in the sky with his wings spread, and then he flies through a very atmospheric rainstorm. I have to say the aesthetics on this scene are really good. When he gets to the human world, you get the city pan, you get to see all the lights of the city, all of it glistening with the rain, and then of course, rain, thunder, lightning, very atmospheric, very awesome. And then I do also have to question, who's the old man? We don't really hear about the old man at any point, I think, in the future. We'll see as we continue to watch the series whether he's mentioned again. But I genuinely don't recall in the TV series, having watched it before, that the old man was mentioned or that we find out who the old man is. And I wonder if we're supposed to just assume that's like a god or something, or if it's told in one of the other media types and it just never made it to the show. But I do question, who is this old man? I really want to know. And I hope they do tell us and I'm just forgetting. On our next scene, Light returns home and his mother is waiting for him, smiling, but with her hands held out, looking for his test results. He hands her his test results, and she compliments him on getting number 1 in the mock exam yet again. He then tells her he's going off to study and asks her not to interrupt him. Once he's in his room, he gets out the book, the notebook, the Death Note, that now has pages and pages of names, and he gazes at it while chuckling to himself in one of the most creepy ways anyone has ever chuckled to themselves. Rook appears and says that he seems to like it, startling him so badly that he falls right off his chair. And then Ryuk introduces himself as the Shinigami who dropped the note, as thunder and lightning flashes, thunder rumbles in the background. And Ryuk is kind of half lit, half in shadow, looking very creepy. Light then gets up and has the nerve to say, well, he's not shocked at all. He just fell out of his chair. And has been waiting for Ryuk, as he realized that once the note worked, then that meant that Shinigami must also be real. Ryuk expresses surprise with how much he's used it in just 5 days. After all, notes have fallen into the human world before, but most were too scared to try it out. Light then says he used the note, knowing it was belonging to a Shinigami, and now the Shinigami is there, so he expects there to be a consequence. For example, he expects it to be taken or to be killed. But Ryuk just looks at him funny and says, that's a fantasy that he came up with, saying he has no intention to do anything to him, as once the notes land in the human world, it belongs to the human world, and in this case, because Light picked it up and used it, it now belongs to Light. He then says he can give it up, but if he does so, then the memory of having it and what he's done with it will be erased. Light gets very excited that there is no consequence for using the note. But Ryuk does say humans who use it experience pain and fear, and when they die, they can neither go to heaven nor hell, saying he'll find out about it after he dies. Light's mom then decides to bring him apples, unable to see Ryuk behind him, and Ryuk explains as the note was once his, Light can see and hear him because he is the new owner, saying that it's a bond between them. Then Ryuk eats an apple and essentially finds his one true love. Light then asks why he was chosen, but Ryuk is still caught up with the apples. He's scarfing them down, wondering what to call this flavor. Is it juicy? We don't know. He is very much in love with those apples. Light demands attention and demands an answer. And he is told by Ryuk that he was not chosen. It was pure chance that he picked it up. And that's why the instructions were in English, which is the most commonly used language in the human world, according to Ryuk. Light then demands if it was by mistake, and Ryuk reveals that he dropped it just because he was bored. He then tells Light about the waste of the Shinigami realm, where all they do is nap and gamble, which is no fun, before asking why he only changed cause of death once, as he looks at the notes that Light has made. Light tells him that heart attack deaths are the best thing about the note, and he's been writing criminal names to slowly reduce the number of evil people, and any fool can tell someone is getting rid of the bad guys, saying he wants them to know of his existence, and that someone is passing judgment. Ryuk asks what the point is, and Light says he was bored too. In this case, we're starting to see Light's hubris showing. He thinks he was chosen, finds out he's not. He wants everybody to know he exists, which is just objectively dumb. If you are a criminal, you really should be trying to keep that a secret. I feel like that's Criminal 101. The scene also contains a lot of exposition. It's literally just them sitting in a room. Well, Light sitting in a room, Ryuk kind of hovering over to the side eating apples. And then they're just talking and exchanging information. So it's basically a big info dump. Though I do have to make a note that Ryuk, in my opinion, is the best designed Shinigami. They all have very unique designs, but of all the designs that I have seen so far in the Shinigami realm, Ryuk's is really the best, in my opinion. So now we're back with Light still, and Light explains how the note seems to have a supernatural power to get someone to use it at least once. And then he enters into a flashback to just after he killed the motorcycle guy. So in this flashback, Light is dramatically limping in the rain while freaking out and having a crisis of conscience over killing two men who both were criminals. He scolds himself that life shouldn't be taken so lightly, and what right does he have to judge people? But no worries, he promptly talks himself around, saying he's always thought that the world was rotten, and rotten people should die. And someone needs to do it, even if it means sacrificing his conscience and his life, as the world cannot stay as it is now. He boosts himself up further by assuring himself if anyone else picked up the note, they wouldn't have had it in them to get rid of the unneeded people. But he can. He has that in him. In fact, he's the only one who can. With the Death Note, he will change the world. It then progresses into a dramatic writing montage with thematic music behind him of an orchestra and people vocalizing. And then with each dramatic swipe of his hand and flourish, prisoners fall one by one in their cages, off of roofs, through glass doors and windows. They're falling like flies. And he writes until he is so exhausted that he is slumped and panting heavily in his chair after such a workout, writing so many names. He then continues narrating to Ryuk his goals for using the obvious deaths of criminals to guide the world onto a better path in the right direction, creating a new world of earnest, kind humans. Ryuk points out then he'll be the only one left with a bad personality. Fair. Causing Light, who claims he's probably the most diligent, honorable student in Japan, and he will become the god of the new world. Ryuk starts to get really excited, saying humans are interesting after all. And I just can't help but think in this scene that Light's narcissism is showing. It's out on full display. I love how quickly he turns around. He's so depressed by it. He's physically limping despite having no injury whatsoever. And then just like, in a moment, snap. Yes, actually, no. This is perfect. I was made for this. There's no need to worry. And then the dramatic writing montage. I'll be honest, when I first watched this show, I always thought it was like a drama, a full drama. I first watched it when I was really young, and I was like, this is a drama, this is like all dark, this is all like serious. But now as an adult, again, rewatching it, I'm like, this is really funny. This is a comedy. This is a dramedy. That is the genre that this falls in, and I will not accept anybody who says otherwise. It's not serious. You cannot write a dramatic writing montage of that level and think this is a serious show. And then he's telling Rook about all his plans and how like amazing he is for them. And then Rook just goes, "Well, then you'll be the only one left with a bad personality." And I thought that was great. That was a great snappy comeback. but I enjoyed this scene. It's probably my favorite scene of the entire episode because it is just so ridiculous and amusing. And of course, that was also the last scene that was in this episode. So now this is the part of Rewatch and Rank where we go ahead and we rank the episode. I rank episodes in basically two different ways. A mostly objective list, which is basically, it's mostly objective because it's based on a chart. However, I made the chart, so my bias, my judgment, and my judgment on what from the chart applies to the particular episode is not really objective. It's got bias, it's got judgment. But it's objective in that I myself am not creating the number. It is created based on this chart, and that chart doesn't change. So even if I hate the episode, if it meets the chart standards, it's going to score highly. So it's mostly objective, not entirely objective. The other ranking, of course, is my personal ranking, where it's basically fully based on my opinion, my feelings. Hence, personal ranking. So we'll start with the mostly objective ranking. So as if you're able to see it, if you're watching it, then the mostly objective ranking values are currently on the screen. But in this case, in this episode, we have the introduction of a multi-arc supporting character, which in this case is Ryuk. We also have the introduction of a multi-arc main character, which is Light. A multi-arc supporting character is worth 3 points. A multi-arc main character is worth 4 points. We also have premise establishment, which is worth 3 points. And that essentially is that this episode establishes the premise of Light finding a note and deciding to create a new world without criminals in it and kill all the criminals. World building also is present in that we are learning the initial rules of the Deathnote and how they are working, and that again is worth 4 points. So at this point, we're at 14. The highest score you can get is a 10, so at this point, it's a 10 out of 10 episode. However, there was one negative rank value that I have to note, and that was that there was a bit too much exposition. Exposition is great to explain things, and I have nothing wrong with regular exposition. But when it gets to the point where the exposition becomes a little bit repetitive, or they're telling us something that they either have already shown us, or we're just as capable of showing us without wasting our time talking about it, I consider that to be in excess. And excess exposition is worth -1 point. Of course, that makes no difference to the ranking in this case because we are already over 10. So our objective ranking is 10 out of 10. My personal ranking is different. So why am I going to rank it the way that I am? Well, I love how the episode really focuses on establishing Light as the main character. We don't see really anybody else. He is in a bubble. And then Ryuk, who is basically his shadow and sounding board, also arrives. But it really heavily focuses on this is your main character, this is how he thinks, this is how he started. That's it. There were a lot of amusing scenes. They made me laugh. Obviously, those are good vibes. So I'm ranking it 9 out of 10. And why is it 9 out of 10 and not 10 out of 10 when I only had positive things to say? Because the lack of L, who is my personal favorite character, is always worth -1. So the fact that there is no L, it's -1. It is a 9 out of 10. And of course, we only have one episode, so far it is first on the list. In addition to our general episode by episode list, we're also going to be ranking the parts against each other as well. This ranking we won't find out really until the series is done, because basically how it works is each episode is worth a value of 10. So every episode that we rank, in this case, part 1 has 26 episodes, so it can score a maximum score of 260. Every episode we'll add to the total score, and then once we finish the part, we'll then total it out and figure out what the percentage is. And then once we're done both parts, they'll each have their own percentage, and whichever has the higher percentage is the better one. In the case of Death Note, it only has 2 parts, so it really will be only between the two. In future series and other series that we're doing, that may be different. There may be multiple seasons, and it's truly a ranking in that case. But in this case, right now, for mostly objective ranking, we have 10 out of 260, and for the personal ranking, we have 9 out of 260. And with that, that ends our episode of Death Note, Part 1, Episode 1, Rebirth. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.